Sometimes, the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
Welcome to the back of the range. I am your host, Ben Adelberg. This is episode 95. Well, I am back in the United States after an absolutely incredible experience at the Walker Cup at Hoylake. Tons of great memories and stories to share. I will get to them all eventually, but we have a great guest on this episode, so let me just say this. If you have ever thought of attending the Walker Cup, do it. You are able to witness the future stars of the game up close and personal in a competitive environment with a very casual feel. It doesn't have the commercial feel of a PGA Tour event with VIP lounges and stadium seating. You're able to walk right down the fairway with these guys, hear the conversations with their partners and caddies. It is such a pure golf atmosphere. And if you needed more convincing, here are the next 3 locations for the Walker Cup. In 2021, Seminole here in South Florida. In 2023, the Old Course at St. Andrews. And in 2025, Cypress Point. Are you kidding me? What better way to plan a golf trip than to include attending the Walker Cup for at least 1 or 2 days? This entire experience would not have been possible without many, many people and the support of amateurgolf.com for sending me over there to cover this event. So thanks to Pete, thanks to Kyle, thanks to Julie for all of their support. I hope to do it again in 2021 at Seminole. I'll be sharing many of these stories on social media throughout the next couple weeks, so make sure that you're following along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All of the links are available in the show notes of this episode. If you were following along last week on Instagram, you probably noticed a lot of the video updates that we did from Hoylake. That was my first time doing video, which is a lot different than doing a podcast. So as always, I need your feedback. Let me know what you liked about the content that we provided last week. Let me know what you'd like to see done moving forward. Let me know what you'd like to see in the future. I'm also giving away some swag that I picked up over there at Hoylake, ball markers. We got some of our towels. We have all sorts of stuff here. So again, make sure you're following along on social media. We're going to give some stuff away all throughout the week. Please keep leaving reviews in Apple Podcasts. You know how important that is. And again, everything you need is at the website, thebackoftherange.com. This week's guest is the victorious U.S. Walker Cup captain, Nathaniel Crosby. Now, this episode was recorded just a day or 2 before the U.S. team was set to leave for Hoylake. I had it recorded and was going to get it edited and sent out before I left, but with Hurricane Dorian approaching South Florida, I decided to leave a few days early. Therefore, this episode didn't get posted until now. However, I think that this episode is a little bit more interesting to listen to now that the Walker Cup has been completed. Captain Crosby shared his thoughts on how tough it was to ultimately get the team that he wanted, what the preparation looked like, and we also spoke about his experience on the 1983 team at Hoylake under Captain Jay Sigel. Oh, and you know there's no shortage of funny stories in this episode because, well, it's Nathaniel Crosby. Before we get to this episode, I'd like to urge everyone to donate to the relief efforts in the Bahamas after the devastation of Hurricane Dorian. I've put a couple links in the show notes, so check those out or donate in your own way, but please keep the people of the Bahamas in your thoughts. So let's get to it. Let's welcome in the victorious United States Walker Cup captain, Nathaniel Crosby. Captain, how are you?
Doing great. The best I can with what I have to work with.
Okay, well, you got a lot to work with going over to Hoylake. You have this incredible U.S. team. We'll kind of get into that a little bit later, but you know, there's your storied amateur career. We're kind of short on time, so we're gonna kind of skip over some of your individual amateur highlights, but definitely Walker Cup experience, and no coincidence that you're going to be captaining the team at Hoylake. Your sole Walker Cup appearance was in '83 at Hoylake. Obviously coming off a Porter Cup win and Eisenhower Trophy appearances. What were kind of your first recollections of getting started with trying to make that team or the summer leading up to the '83 team?
Well, for me personally, I kind of got the easy road because I won the U.S. Amateur the week after the previous Walker Cup. And then and now, it's pretty much a fait accompli that you're going to make the team if you're won the U.S. Amateur in that 2-year body of work. So, I didn't have to grind or strive. I think the Eisenhower team, it's only 3 players now. It was only 4 players then. You could win a U.S. Amateur and still miss out on that team. So the following summer, I was low-am in the Open and won the Porter Cup. So that squeezed me onto that team and had a great experience in Lausanne, Switzerland with the Eisenhower team that we won.
Well, so you had a little bit of an easier route, maybe similar to maybe what Cole Hammer and Akshay Bhatia and, I think looking back, Hagestad and Brandon Wu were, I guess, obviously 3 and 4, but more like 3A and 3B with all the incredible summer that Brandon Wu had. How have you related to some of the guys that are really trying to make a push to make the team, knowing how hard it is on them just bouncing from tournament to tournament? I guess, what's been your relationship and process of getting to know these guys?
Well, the interesting thing is I think a lot of the guys, I really got the team that I wanted.
Okay.
Save a few players, but, the guys that narrowly missed, especially the one that was first alternate, I think Chandler Phillips won 12 college tournaments.
Yeah.
Which I don't think that's been done since maybe Tiger was. Big shout out to Chandler. I think only 6 of the 5 or 6 of the 12 were in the last 2 years. But, Chandler really wanted to make the team, and that was really sad. He hung around and didn't turn pro. But Andy Ogletree was unbelievable. He was lower in the rankings, although he was second-team All-American, and I hadn't focused on him the last couple of years as much because he was lower in the rankings. Matter of fact, I was watching his teammate, Tyler Strafassi at Georgia Tech a little bit more, and then, after watching his game in the practice squad this past week, he is, an incredible amateur champion. He hit the ball probably higher and softer than any other player in the practice squad, which explains how successful he was at Pinehurst when you're hitting into those pitchers' mounds with faked out greens.
Absolutely.
Hitting it high and soft was a huge advantage, and Andy probably hit it higher and softer than anybody else on the team last week.
Yeah, and it's funny. He was not, I did a Road to Hoylake series here at the back of the range, and I focused on a lot of the top guys. And, he was, like you said, he was kind of coming in at about 100 or 115 in the World Amateur rankings, but he did have, I believe, a top 10 at the North-South, and I kind of missed that one too.
He was second-team All-American, so
yeah.
The rankings didn't really treat him very fairly somehow. And I think the World Amateur Golf rankings really reflected the college players pretty steadily. But there were a few guys, I think Peter Quest and Davis Thompson, a couple of others that didn't really get their due with the rankings for whatever reason. Maybe they played too many local tournaments. I know that that's the case with Matt Parziali, but I had been watching the rankings and really studying the players for the last year and a half, and virtually got everybody, really all 10 of them were players that I had focused on, with the exception of Andy. As far back as a year and a half. I mean, John Augenstein was outside the window coming into the U.S. Amateur, and we're texting each other back and forth the week before, and I'm like, get your act together and start playing it. I'll watch your back. But,
wow,
he really played great at the amateur, and, shooting 65 in the first 18 of the finals, would have knocked out anybody else in any other given year. And to Andy's credit, he really hung in there and stayed within shouting distance, and was able to come back from incredible golf from John in that first and most of the second round, really.
Yeah, the thing that I found really fascinating just following it at the Western, I know you're at the Western Am at Point of Woods, obviously. I know you're at Pinehurst for the US Am, but it's really the last 2 tournaments where these guys had the opportunity to really distance themselves, and it seemed that either many of the guys didn't make match play at the Western, and then it seemed all of them made match play or a lot of them made match play at the USAM. How do you gauge that at the last two important tournaments before you got to select that team? I'll kind of let you speak to, like, what are you just looking at their individual performances? How do you gauge that after a big, body of work that they've put together through college and then other events?
I think it's, first of all, I have a significant input, but not a say-so or a vote.
Of course.
In the process. And then there's 7 votes on the committee. But, I think that, certainly Brandon Wu and, Isaiah Salinda and Stephen Fisk, it would have been almost, regardless of how they played the Western and the U.S. Amateur, I think it would have been hard to taking them off the team. Alex Smalley won Sonny Hanna twice.
Yeah.
He didn't play the Western, and then he lost in a playoff for match play. But, Alex is somebody that we've been watching for a couple of years and incredible, soft-spoken, but incredible talent and really sneaky long. So, it's just, you never know, because if there were more unranked players that had gotten, to the semifinals or the finals, he could have thrown, more of a deal. But really, what happened was John was outside the top 10 going in and did what he did, and obviously combined that with his already high ranking. And then Andy, came in from not being ranked very high, which probably wasn't a just ranking, but
sure,
he wasn't ranked very high. And, so there were a couple of guys that were inside the deal that got bumped, Chandler being one. But, it's always hard. I mean, Robbie Zalesnik, who's been the team manager for the last 5 or 6 teams, is just like, it's excruciating when you get down to having to make the final choice and having to pick, the 9 and 10 spot over the 11 and 12. And it certainly was no exception this year. It was a very emotional and difficult, process. But, we couldn't be happier for John, who I've been watching for a long time, and for Andy, who, proved himself at the amateur and has an incredible game. But he's the guy that I'm getting to know for the first time, and really enjoyed his company and getting to know him last week at the practice squad matches at Pinehurst.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you a little bit about those practice sessions, the one in December down here in South Florida, and then obviously this one that just wrapped up at Pinehurst. But I want to kind of hit back on 83 at Hoylake for your experience playing. The thought of having mid-ams on a Walker Cup team is something that's been discussed over the last several years to, great extent, whether there were 2 on the 2015 team, McCoy and Harvey. And then obviously last time it was just Stuart Hagestad. He's back on the team this year. When you played, I believe you were around 21, 22 years old. You had a lot of mid-ams, because back in the 80s, it was a little bit of a different scope and different feel. You had Lewis and Holtgreave, and obviously your captain, Jay Sigel. How much did you remember having those guys on the team, having older amateurs? How much did that help you? And I guess, are you looking for Hagestad to do the same thing on this team?
The World Amateur team, the Eisenhower in 82, I was the only college player on the 14 squad. It was the Holtgreave, Lewis, and Bob Lewis, who was in the semifinals and the finals of the 2 previous amateurs, and Holtgreave, Lewis, and Siegel. And then it was the same guys on the Walker Cup team, as well as the mid-amateur champion, Bill Hoffer. I think that was right after the second mid-amateur ever. So
yes,
the mid-amateur was kind of new to the world. But I think the USGA has included the mid-amateurs in the Walker Cup for the sake of promoting the game at the mid-amateur level. I think it means it makes the Coleman Cup, it makes the mid-amateur important, it makes a lot of the other tournaments that are only, even the Crump Cup at Pine Valley, it gives some meaning to those tournaments other than just the tournaments themselves, so that they have some contribution toward making the team. I think that Great Britain and Ireland didn't match the commitment of having to put a mid-amateur or 2 on the team. So I think we stepped it back. USGA stepped it back before the last event, so that there's only one. It's only a mandatory one mid-amateur on our team. And look, Stuart Hagestad is he's no handicap.
Of course not.
Definitely, he's got a game that is, he's long, he's straight, he hits a low fade, he cuts it from up the green with the best of them, and that is really going to be, he's probably going to be one of our stronger players because of the type of course Hoyle Lake is. But when you ask about my personal experience at the Walker Cup in '83, Jay Siegel, after I was the third ranked amateur in the country the previous 2 years, but to Jay Siegel's credit, I hadn't played much competitive golf that year. It actually was a fourth-year redshirt, so I could catch up on my studies after playing about 40 tournaments the year before because I was invited. I was playing college and a lot of tour events as an amateur, and redshirted my fourth year to play a fifth year to get my degree. And Jay had recognized that I wasn't playing terrific. I wasn't playing bad, but I wasn't playing terrific, and I got beat in the singles. So he benched me twice. And the funny part, now it's funny, but it was a lot of baggage for me for many years, is that we had a captain's dinner in West Palm Beach a couple of weeks after I was announced as the captain. I think there were 8 or 9 captains there, and everybody was going around the table giving me advice. And when it was Jay's turn to get up and talk and give me advice, he said, Nathaniel, whatever you do, play everybody 3 times. And then I downloaded on it.
Oh,
God. I cussed him out a little bit and said, I've been hanging on to this baggage for 35 years, and I want to let you know that you benched me twice.
Yeah, you played only 2 of the 4 sessions.
Yeah. So now, and Bill Hoffer and I beat their best team in the alternate shot the second day, which was Philip Walton and George McGregor, and I played great. So it basically made the experience a great experience, but it could have been kind of a downer if I'd have lost that match and left it, with 0-2 participants. So, I intend to play every player 3 times, and it gets a little tricky, but everybody is this team especially has a lot of parity. I think Cole last summer was by far the best amateur in the country. I think American amateur. I don't think his Western amateur medalist in winning the Western amateur. I think that's only been done 3 times, and then he almost did the same thing at the U.S. amateur if he hadn't run into Hovland.
Yeah.
So it's just an amazing run last year for Cole. And when I look at how Brandon Wu, he played so well in the U.S. Open this year, and he did it easily. He didn't make a lot of long putts. I was watching most of that. So I just think that we paired them together at Pinehurst this past week in the practice squad. We made them play alternate shot for 5 rounds, and we paired them with each other with different players every time, so that we don't really have anybody cemented with anybody at this point. And we want to just make sure that everybody plays 3 times. Nobody's going to leave with a bad taste in their mouth. And the only message that I have for these guys is that it's going to be a lifetime memory. So you want to win for the sake of your 50-year memory going forward, right? Or 60-year memory or 70-year memory. You don't want to remember the Walker Cup, in the disappointment. You want to remember the Walker Cup for the gratification of winning. And because it'll never, there'll be a lot of Milwaukee Opens, there'll be a lot of Hilton Head. There's going to be a lot of tour events, and I only played 3 years on the European Tour, and even in 3 years, the tournaments kind of run into each other, and it's hard to almost distinguish the one from the other.
Yeah.
And if you play 15 or 20 years on the tour, I can't imagine trying to remember was that 2024 or was that 2026?
Yeah, all those. Yeah, a T7 at the Honda is going to get lost in the shuffle, but winning a match on the 18th green at your only or one of your only Walker Cup appearances, that's gonna stay with you for life, I would imagine.
I think so. I mean, I'm not underestimating the great experiences that these guys are going to have
Right.
on the PGA Tour or elsewhere, and in some of the incredible memories and moments and heroics that they're going to accomplish in the upcoming decades. And this team in particular just seems to be really solid. They're very sure of themselves. There's some flashy guys on the team. There's some understated guys on the team, but we really enjoyed the camaraderie of playing together, team, in the practice squads, and they did talk a lot of smack, so they fit in with their captain pretty good.
Oh yeah,
I like to talk. I like to give them a little smack so that they can. There's no. It's not easy being a Crosby for my kids, so it's not going to be easy being these guys aren't. These aren't going to get any special treatment. There's no kissing up around the Crosbys. So, and these guys were giving it to each other last week. So it was so much fun, and I can't wait for them to buckle down and get into the competition next week. But we've got about 5 practice rounds and then a round at Birkdale to show them that course. And we're leaving on Friday. So it'll be a long week. I'm hoping for fair but windy weather. I think that when my European tour experiences, you have to get used to the rain, and if we're over there for 7 days of golf with rain every day, it's not unusual.
Right.
So I've tried to give them a heads up on that, and but also let them know that. There's a lot of these places, there's no air conditioning, so you don't want it to be hot either.
Oh, of course. Yeah. No, they'll be hit with just about anything and everything. You mentioned, I have to ask you give the needle then, and they're talking smack. I know it's going to be hard to pick, but, you mentioned it's not easy on the Crosby kids, but these are kind of your adopted kids for at least this week heading over across the pond. If you can, not comparing games, but which one of your players seems to have the most Crosby-esque ability of talking smack and giving the needle?
Well, that's a pretty easy one.
Okay.
I think Augenstein is definitely a flashy guy, and he is giving it out on every shot, on every hole. He also gives it to himself. I kind of deemed him the John McEnroe of the team because he's an incredible player. He's an incredible player and has a bright future. He might have to control his violent mood swings.
All right, so we need to keep rules officials away from Augenstein so he doesn't pull a "you cannot be serious" thing. Okay, so we'll keep him away.
He's a solid guy, and I talked to his bandy coach, and I guess they've come a long way to get him to where he's at. So we've got to deal with where he's at right now. But he's amazing. He was having trouble hitting the fairway the last 9 holes of the practice squad matches, and I said, "Hey, that's just a Red Bull crash. Try not to drink 5 Red Bulls a day, and you'll probably maintain your energy level a little bit better."
Oh God. Oh man. Let me ask you this one. I talked to your captain, Jay Sigel, earlier, and I had to ask him about, it's we're all golfers. We get new stuff, new gear, shirts, bags, all that stuff. And I said, do you still have any of your Walker Cup stuff? And he's like, oh yeah, I've given a lot of it away, but I still have my 1977 Walker Cup bag. It's small, it's cloth, and it's pretty ratty. Do you still have your 83 stuff?
I don't. And, I think I couldn't get the pants wouldn't get over my ankle. and my sweater, I need a pair. My son said, I asked my son the other day if my shirt was in his closet or if he grabbed my shirt by accident. He said, what would I need with a parachute?
Oh, ouch. Oh my God.
So, I think my son Brendan found my old World Amateur Team travel bag and took a picture of it, but I haven't actually seen it. I've seen it on Instagram, and that's about it. I've lost all of my old collectibles from the Walker Cup, but it's funny. I have a picture that we took of the team and framed it, and I have it on my den wall with some other memorabilia from my amateur career. And Brad Faxon's a neighbor, and he came over for a party a year or so ago. And I said, I got to show you my den, Brad. And I said, here's what you'll do to your den or your house. You'll have a room like this when you have a failed professional career. He says, yeah. He says, I got all my Walker Cup stuff, but it's I think I got it in the basement somewhere. He says it's not on display.
So he's got the PGA Tour stuff, and you got the Walker Cup stuff. What have now? I've seen limited pictures of the guys at Pinehurst, and every picture it seems like they have a different pair of shoes, shirts, hats, bags. You've probably been involved in a little bit of this, but are they going to be able to get all of their new gear onto the plane and over to Hoylake?
Well, it's interesting. We took all of our items from Pinehurst and all brought them home. And I told the team manager, I was like, that is an accident waiting to happen because somebody's mother or sister or nanny or whatever, I mean, we're all going to get, by the time we wash our stuff and fold it and iron it, somebody's going to have somebody will have a missing item. And to be honest with you, some of the, we didn't quite get the full, couple of items were missing for certain players. And, so I'm waiting on a couple of Oxford shirts as we speak before we leave on Friday. But, getting everything there, we're going to be over there a week ahead of time. So we've got plenty of time to make amends. And we're only, the uniform needing to be exact, just for the matches and the ceremony.
Of course.
So we'll get it figured out.
Oh yeah. I know when I spoke with Captain Holtgreave, one of the really important things that he had mentioned about his experience being a captain is not just the things on the golf course, but also getting the guys to really understand that you're representing your country. I know that they went over to look at the 9/11 monument area, and during 2013 when they played at National Golf Links. I'm wondering, is that been discussed with the team or anything? Any sort of the patriotic aspect of being on a Walker Cup team? Are there things planned over there, or have there been discussions, maybe perhaps at Pinehurst, anything different that maybe casual fans of a Walker Cup would not know as far as what the team's done?
I think when we, asked everybody or everybody was interviewed, I witnessed a lot of the kids getting interviewed, players, I shouldn't call them kids. I watched a lot of them being interviewed, and I think that it's all, there's a lot of, it means something to every player. And I heard that in their interviews. We haven't gone airborne about it, or I haven't tried to use the flag to motivate so much. But I think that when I grew up, it was watching the Summer Olympics in, Mexico City when I was 7 years old. And I was actually at the Munich Olympics with my family in 72 and watching Montreal in 76. And it's such a amazing deal because for me, there wasn't golf in the Olympics at that time. And of course, it was always the Olympics back then, and amateur participation in the Olympics was dedicated to non-career oriented. It was all adolescent. It was all teenagers and athletes in their teens and their early 20s.
Sure.
Still in college. It wasn't the dream team, and it wasn't all that. And somehow, this part of their life, the playing for your country, is more exciting than it would be perhaps when you're much older. And you kind of see that with the basketball in the Olympics now. And I think the golf in the Olympics has finally arrived. It's fantastic. But, there's somehow, I'm remiss that those events aren't held for true amateurs that are, in their, approaching their professional careers and not ones that are already in the middle of their professional careers.
Right. Well, I know that we have not hit on your amateur career. I know you played collegiately at the University of Miami and obviously U.S. Amateur Champion 81. And yeah, son of Bing Crosby. I know that there's, I think one of a fascinating book that I would definitely like to mention to people listening to this podcast is your book, 18 Holes with Bing, Golf Life and Lessons from Dad. And I've read the book, and there's so many great things about, the Crosby clam bake that eventually turned into the AT&T, National Pro-Am. And there's several great stories there, but I am wondering if you would be so kind to share a Ben Hogan story, which I thought was just fantastic in the book. But you've had some time playing with Mr. Hogan, didn't you?
The interesting scenario was that my dad's best friend was George Coleman.
Yeah.
The Coleman was named after, and George Coleman managed to fly. He was a board member of the Pennzoil company, and Ben Hogan was flying Ben Hogan around in the DC-3 plane back then, while the other players are driving from tournament to tournament. But basically, the great story about Ben Hogan is I got a chance to play with him shortly after my dad died. George Coleman, I'd kind of grown up with him on family vacations, and he took a special interest in me because of our common love for the game of golf. And he invited me to come down and play with Ben Hogan for 4 days and spend New Year's dates between Christmas and New Year's. And it was amazing. I got to, spend all that time with him, not only on the golf course, but staying at George Coleman's house. We had dinners. We had dinner parties where George Coleman looked like a Palm Beach, where Ben Hogan looked like a Palm Beach socialite.
Oh my gosh!
But yeah, I mean, you wouldn't expect it. But I had just finished reading the book Go for Broke by Arnold Palmer, and it describes Hogan's shot on 17 at Cherry Hills where he sucked it into the water.
Yeah.
And I asked him at dinner one night when it was just George Coleman and his wife Dawn and Ben Hogan and his wife Valerie and myself as a 16-year-old.
Oh wow!
And I asked him about that shot, and Valerie says, "Don't ask him about that shot. He still has nightmares about it."
Oh.
And Ben said, "No, I'll tell him about it." And he described the shot that he hit perfectly, and it hit a pitch mark in the green because the U.S. Open and then and many years forward, the greens are like concrete, so he expected the ball to bounce forward and bite. The ball hit in a pitch mark and didn't bounce and sucked back into the water. So that was, but he got through his demons by telling me this story only because I was 16 and anxious. And the other story that was kind of interesting was I had we were packed up to the last day. We were going to, packed all our bags, and they're in the trunk of the car, and we're getting our clubs out of the trunk. And I have we all used to blow dry our hair with these handheld blow dryers, we used to call them in the 70s.
Sure.
Because everybody had a mop, and Ben Hogan picks his hair dryer of mine up and says, "What's this?" I said, "Well, it's a hair dryer, Mr. Hogan." And he says, "Well," he was dumbfounded. And he looks at me and he said, "Well, whose is this?" And then I look at my shoes, and I was like, "Oh boy, it's mine, Mr. Hogan." He says, "But Nathaniel's hair dryers are for girls." And that found its way into the foreword of the Ben Hogan Mystique book by where the foreword was written by Ben Crenshaw. So, at any rate, that story will live in infamy.
Well, I'm glad you're able to share it. I'm going to put a link to the book in the notes of this episode. I enjoyed the book because, I'm glad you told the Hogan hairdryer story, because I read that and I'm like, oh gosh, of all the people to have to tell you of a hairdryer to, Ben Hogan is probably not. Oh, that's not the person you want to. Oh no,
hair dryers are for girls, Nathaniel.
Oh gosh. Captain, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're getting all packed up and ready to head across to Hoylake, and enjoy, not just enjoy the time over there, but enjoy the captaincy, and best of luck to you and the rest of the guys. And hopefully we'll get to catch up and do it again soon.
Thanks so much. It's been a real lifelong experience. I'm so grateful to the USGA for picking me. I can't even tell you. It's not just what's going to happen next week. The whole 2-year experience has just been amazing, and one of the great times of my life.
And there you have it. Another great episode here at the Back of the Range Golf Podcast. Special thanks to Nathaniel Crosby, the victorious United States Walker Cup captain. Congrats on the achievement. Congrats to the entire team and the USGA for all that they did. Remember, follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Leave a review at Apple Podcast, and we'll see you again next week here at the Back of the Range.